Now. Okay, so that's the recording started. So thanks very much for joining us on this first session for discussing the multi-folder design. I will start by sharing out my screen so you can see the mockups. So hopefully at this point, everybody should be able to see my screen. You should see a slide that says scenario walkthrough. A developer wants to work on multiple node modules at the same time in one window. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yep. Perfect. So let's just get right into it. So just to walk through, imagine I'm the developer and I open up Visual Studio Code. It opens up in this empty state. And so the first thing that I do, just as we do today, I click on Open Folder. And I choose the Express folder. It so happens I have a development folder on my machine, and I have 3 folders underneath that. I want to work with the Express folder and the Express plugin folder. So I start by opening up the Express folder. And then I invoke the menu and I open the next folder, and I have this new command here called add folder. So I choose add folder, and I choose my Express plugin folder. And now I have 2 folders in the Explorer. So I can see both of these folders at one go. We can see in the stash up here that I've got the title of both folders, Express, Express plugin, and each of them is at the same level in the Explorer right there. Any comments so far? Is this how you would expect this to work?
Yeah, that looks good. Great.
Now, as an alternative, we have the sorry, before you even get to alternative, one thing to point out here, we have a number of files in both folders that are the same name. Editor config, for example, is in both folders. So we disambiguate by showing the name of the folder whenever I open one of them, in this case, the editor config in the Express plugin folder. And so we put the Express plugin folder name, append it to the tab, just because you may not have the Explorer open to be able to disambiguate yourself. And we can see the same is true. We also have the package.json file open in both folders. So when I open it inside the Express folder, I see that there. So that's that disambiguation in the case where there's files with the same name in each folder.
I have one short question there. How would I identify that Express plugin is a different project, because they seem to be on the same level?
Tell me more about what you mean. We have.
So currently, currently, if I open up a folder, so you just switch it up one level. So currently, if I open, for example, Express in Visual Studio Code today, it will only show benchmarks, examples, lib. So now, after I open up Express, I'll have that root folder there.
Yeah,
that will be the difference.
That's right. We've got the 2 root folders. In this design here, we've got 2 roots. We've got Express and Express plugin right here. Was that not clear, or were you expecting something different?
No, it's clear. It was just based on the current behavior. It was a bit confusing.
Does anybody else have a similar reaction?
No, it makes sense to me.
Right.
Yeah, it looks good.
Because it does lead me into we do have an alternative. There's one way I could show you, just like I've shown you here, where we have the 2 root folders, or alternatively we could have 2 sashes where we make a bigger distinction between the 2 folders.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. But then if you open the folders, I guess it would scroll off the bottom, the toolbar section. I'm thinking
that's
about.
Right. You would. I mean, especially if you had 3, 4 folders, then that section for adding a new folder to this, would scroll off the bottom. There would be some differences. Absolutely.
I prefer the first way with just one sash there. I don't know if that's just me, but I like I guess this way you get the ability to be able to click the quick new folder, new file buttons per folder, but I don't know how. I mean, I don't
also
personally use those buttons.
Yeah, I mean, I
What
was
do people
thinking
think?
if you had 5 or 6 projects and you're trying to scroll up and down through them quickly, it's might be nicer to have a more bold separation between the projects, with a bar like that instead of just a root folder. But I don't know. Hard to say.
Okay, well that's good. That's good to hear. For the remainder of the slides, we will be showing this design here. And if I was to summarize from that quick conversation, it sounds like this is probably the preference, and this is perhaps how you had anticipated seeing this before I showed you any of these designs. Alexei has just suggested that we might highlight the root with a color instead of the second option. So Alexei, you mean these 2 folders here, Express and Express Plugin, highlighted slightly differently, just to make so you could quickly scan through that list to see where your roots are. Right, that's a pretty good idea. So let me go through them and show you how the rest of what the experience is like throughout the rest of the product. So let's look at search, for example. So our proposal is that search just searches across all folders. So in this case, I've gone to the search view, I've searched for the term Express, and we show 6 results across 6 files in 2 folders. And we just have the first 3 results are all from the Express folder, and the next 3 results from the Express plugin. So our intent, our idea is that we the behavior of the experiences inside the product just reflect the fact that there are now multiple folders. We don't require you to say search in this folder, then search in that folder. Just say search works across all folders. And the same is true throughout some other experiences. Let's take a look at source control. Now, one of the we have in the status bar, you'll be familiar with our indicator in the status bar that tells you the number of incoming and outgoing changes if your folder is under source control. Now, when we have 2 or more folders that are under source control, what we didn't want to do was to start to pepper the status bar with multiple indicators of incoming and outgoing changes in each folder. So instead, we just aggregated them into the status indicator here. We're simply telling you now that there are changes across all your folders. So when you click on the indicator there, we give you the pop-up that tells you some more details about the changes in all of the folders. We can see there have been some changes in Express and the Express plugin. There are some incoming changes to sync. Now I can click on our the Express folder here, and then that sets context inside the source code control plugin view-let. We've got what we call a master detail view here, where we show both folders and we give a summary of the changes in each folder. And then when you select one of the folders, you see the details. So if I select Express plugin, for example, I can see the list of changes there. And I can go back and switch. So you get the idea that I can switch backwards and forwards between each of these to see the details. So let me just slide back. So just to recap, we start off by aggregating the presence of changes inside the status bar. So we just tell you that there are changes inside each of the folders. We give you some information about the number of changes in each folder, and then a way to go to see the details by clicking on the affordance there. And then we have this master detail experience inside the source code management view-let. What are your thoughts? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's okay. And pretty clear.
I think it would be interesting to, instead of sorting by the folders there, sort by the repositories. So, for example, Express and Express plugin might both be in the same repo, potentially. Or you might have 3 folders, and 2 are in one repo and one's in a different repo. And so it might be interesting to sort by repo instead of by folder.
Right. I think in our that's a thing for us to look at and explore further. I think in our our assumptions here would that these are in separate repositories, but we should explore that multiple folders in the same repository. That's a good point. That's another explanation.
Yeah, I'm trying things out in Visual Studio Code as you talk, just to see like what it does now. And if you drag a subfolder in, like not the parent folder of a repo, it still lets you commit to that repo just fine.
Mm-hmm.
So it does know. I mean, it should, I guess, it should know where the repository is. But if you had multiple folders, I think that would be an interesting thing to do.
Yep. In this case, I think one of the things for us is that the multiple. Another assumption where there's a repository per folder here, we are sort of switching between repositories. Right now, VS Code just assumes that there's one repository at some level in the folder hierarchy, and that's the context that it shows. Now we've got multiple repositories here. But that's a good thing for us to look at and explore in more detail. Alexei said, on a bottom toolbar, I would expect Git status for current open file context. Okay, so that's an interesting comment. So with that, you mean, Alexei, that right here I have package.json in the Express folder. So you expect the status bar to show me the Git status for that repository?
Yeah, I like that too.
I think that could actually be a little confusing, though, if you have two repositories and one has been edited and the other hasn't. If you're looking at a file from the folder that hasn't been edited and the bottom status bar says that you're clean.
That's right.
You'd have to like be very specific, like maybe show the name of the repository that's clean or something.
That's what I was going to say. You need to prefix it with the folder.
And that's the reason why we wanted to aggregate the numbers here, because we didn't want to miscommunicate that there were changes elsewhere if we were to use the context. Just like I think it was Nicholas that said that this would be the problem if there were no changes in this repository. We would end up showing no changes here, maybe even with the name of the folder. But it's still then, we were concerned that would then miscommunicate about the status of the other repositories. So, Alexis typing. On the other hand, there is no changes for the current context file. That's what we talked about.
Yeah.
While it says changes.
But I suppose the icon would show the aggregate number of changes for all the folders.
Yeah. I guess Alexis does have a good point.
The other thing is that a lot of files specifically can have no changes, while the repository as a whole does have changes. And so right now, like if you're looking at a file that has no changes, it will still show there are changes in the repo in the bottom left.
That's right, because it's the repo context that it reflects. Yeah.
Rather than the file context.
Maybe we can find a way to show kind of both status. So if I have multiple projects, to show kind of a global status, like we have there with changes and star. And then if I open a file from a specific project, then show some information for that specific repo, where that file belongs. So this way we have a separation between them.
So I think the overall feedback that I'm getting here is that perhaps we do need some more information in the status bar rather than just the fact that there are changes. The need to interact with the status bar to see this more. This is the kind of the level of detail that we're all talking about. We want to see at the repo level, what's changed. If I was able to see that there's changes in Express plugin but not in Express, without having to interact with this and pull up this affordance here, I think that's sort of what everybody's sort of heading towards. That's the direction the feedback is going.
Yeah.
So we'll need to think about how we might iterate on that and make the status indicator richer and have it show more status information. So that's really helpful. But otherwise, in terms of the view-let design, that all seems fine. There was no major pushback on that, I heard.
Yeah, that looks exactly, other than the thing about the repo instead of the folder, that looks exactly like what I expect. I can pick my repos there, and I can pick my changes the same way that I do now. It looks great.
Right. Excellent. Okay, so let's move on. So for launching, if I have, each folder maybe has a number of configurations, debug configurations, and it's launch.json, we would just disambiguate. We'd have the name of the folder containing each launch.json, and then a flyout menu to show the configurations in each of those JSONs. So those launch.jsons. So if you want to launch under the debugger, you've got a bunch of configurations under Express, you would just choose them like so. And we would allow you could, as we do today, if you have multiple configurations, you could still launch multiple debug sessions, just like similar to how it works today. So there we're just putting in another top level to distinguish between the folders. And similarly for tasks, if you have a task.json inside each folder, we will just list out all the different tasks that you have defined. Here we show the tasks in the Express folder, and here we show the tasks in the Express plugin folder.
Yeah, I'd kind of prefer to have the debug options flat like this. But,
oh, really?
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, if nothing more than for consistency's sake, but I don't know. Yeah. I don't have that many configurations, so.
So here, it's an interesting point. Here we're sort of looking at two different ways. You can have it flat in this list, or you can have it in a sort of like a tree-like format. And you could imagine having the tree format here as well. We could have, Express, and then indented underneath it, compile and run tests, and then Express plugin over to the left, and then compile and run tests underneath that. But here we've chosen a flat design. Here we chose a sort of more tree-like design. And I think, Chad, you're saying you prefer the flat design.
Yeah, I do, but I mean, I'm just.
And what's the reason for that?
I don't like clicking around a lot, and even with the keyboard, you have to left, right, and
Right. So you like just to be able to arrow down through the list and boom.
Yeah.
Right.
And the autocomplete on it is nice too, although in that debug menu there is no autocomplete, so it doesn't really make sense. Yeah.
What if you did something like? So I'm just trying to think about this in terms of how I might use this. And normally I'd have a configuration. I'd be running a configuration in just one of the folders, and the other folders would somehow get pulled in. I don't know. Maybe that's what other people are doing. So what if you had a list where the configurations from the current selected target are right there, and then at the bottom it's other. I don't know. Somehow there's a flyout menu at the bottom for the folders that aren't currently selected. I'm just making something up here.
And you would do that because?
Just because when I have configurations like this, normally the way I would do it is I probably wouldn't have any configurations except in one of the folders that I've added to the project.
Right.
Just the way that if you have, I don't know, a website or a coding project, you probably have folders with libraries in them, and then a folder with your actual executable, and you're running that executable all the time. So I think maybe a lot of times you wouldn't care about most of the other folders configurations, but maybe not.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we work with, we basically have an Angular front end and then a web back end, but then we like to share some type definitions or interface definitions in TypeScript across those two things through a shared NPM library, right? So it's nice to be able to launch the website, launch the browser, whatever the tasks are, kind of independently because they're sharing in that intermediary library.
Right.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, I'd be happy with any of these solutions. These both look.
Yeah, I mean, they all look fine to me. Yeah.
Right. Okay, Alexis just asked, will we have an option to limit search in a specific only project rather than across all projects? And I think, yes, that would be the case. We would support, that would be a configuration we would have to support inside search. That would definitely make sense.
Yeah, so the tasks from the current project should show up at the top, so they should be sorted, I guess.
What's your definition of current project?
The last file that I accessed.
Okay.
So if the current file is in Express folder, then I should see the Express tasks first, And it will also be nice if we could type express in there in the search and only see the task from that folder. So filtering like that.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Let me move
I think,
on.
can I just chip
Yeah,
throw
go
something
ahead.
in there? I think I'd rather see at the top, not from the current file, but from the last executed task. I'd rather have a most recently used thing there than a current file. But maybe that's just me.
Right. So it sounds like you were, if this was if this was our first release, given a flat list, everything in it, it sounds like everybody said that they'd be comfortable with that. Then there's
Absolutely.
additional tweaks that we can do on top of that, perhaps to MRU or reflect the most recent file or something. But to begin with, this flat list would be satisfactory.
Yes,
that's accurate.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me move on just to show errors and warnings. Similarly, we just have effectively this is a flat list. There's this every element in the list is a file that contains errors, and we just show the files inside the Express folder and then files inside the Express plugin folder. So very similar to the task experience. We have not shown the tree, we've not shown the Express folder, then files with errors inside the Express folder, and then the Express plugin folder, and files with errors inside the Express plugin folder. And then output, you can just switch between output that's coming from if you've got output channels from different. You've launched something from these different folders, or you've got some Git activity in different folders. You can just switch the output channel and read that output from there. Okay, let me go on. So I want to spend at least maybe the last 10 minutes at most talking about how this actually works. Because what happens under the covers is that when the user opened the Express plugin folder, if you remember early on, right at the start, I showed you the user opening the Express folder, then doing file add folder and adding Express plugin. What we do, and what we're proposing to do in this design, is that in the user settings, and that's important, in the user settings file, we add this entry here called workspaces. Workspaces is an array of workspaces. Each element in this setting is what we call one workspace. The workspaces defines a path, and that path is the path to the first folder that was added, in this case the Express folder. So we can see this path as development/Express. And then there's another entry which again is an array of additional folders. And these are the folders that the users then added to the Explorer through the add folder command. So here, this setting here just reflects the fact that the user started with the Express folder, and then they added the Express plugin folder. And what that means is that we'll reflect this, we'll update this setting based on actions that you take. So let's say you choose to remove this folder from the Explorer, then we just remove that whole setting. Now you're back to the single folder mode. Everything works as it works today, and the workspaces entry is removed. That particular workspace entry is removed from the array. Now this setting persists, which means that it's in your user settings folder. So let's say I just closed that folder that I had. Forget that I just deleted it. Let's imagine that I have this workspace setting in my user settings file. And now when I do open folder and I choose the Express folder, which is the root folder, I get both Express and Express plugin, because in my user settings I have this workspace setting that tells me that when I open this when I open this folder, I also open these additional folders. So that gets restored. So it persists. You don't have to set this configuration up every time you open VS Code. As long as you don't muck around with that setting, you don't remove the folders, we'll remember that you had these folders open together at the same time. Now, just a quick question. The fact that it persists between sessions, is that expected?
Yeah, it is for me.
I wouldn't say that I expect it based on my use of other editors, but I'm very excited about it.
Right. So that's what we're proposing to do. Now, of course, this is an array, so you're not limited to just having one workspace setting. So just as an example, let's say I have the folder Connect. Well, what I'm saying here is when I open folder Connect, I also want Connect Plugin and Connect Plugin Builder. When I open folder VS Code, I want the folder VS Code Docs and VS Code Distro opened as well. So you can these are in your user settings, and as you just create open folders and add new folders and add folders to the Explorer, we'll remember that and we will persist that in your user settings. So there's no limit on that. Now, let's say if how do you share that information? If that information is stored in your user settings, how do I share it so that if I want you to have the same setup as me? Well, let's look at one way in which you might do this. So imagine I've joined some team. I'm working with Ben right here, and Ben has set up the project for me, this Express project. So I can just check this. I can clone this from GitHub. I clone the project from GitHub and open it using VS Code. And the project just contains one folder, and there's a workspace settings folder file inside the folder. You can see it defines a path. It says, the current folder. This is the root folder, and I now have relative folder paths to additional folders, Express and Express Plugin. I don't have those on my disk though. So what I need to do is run this setup file, run this shell script to get those folders on disk. So that shell script is basically just 2 git clone commands. So when I run the setup command, it'll clone those repositories. And then because of the settings that I have in this, because of the workspace settings that I've placed here, those 2 folders, once they are cloned, now show up in the Explorer. When I cloned them, they got copied to the same folder on disk, so the Explorer knew they were there, and I said with the workspace settings that I want those to be opened along with this Express project. So now they show up right there. So that's one way in which you could share. Once you get a setup, you could take your workspace entry that's in your user settings folder, and you could, in this case, you could create this new project, a new folder, and just put a workspace settings in there that defines the 2 folders that you want to create. And this way, you could then check that settings, that workspace settings in to GitHub. You don't need to check in your whole user settings file, and you can share it with colleagues that you're working with. Any comments on that, Flo?
No, I like that. I mean, is it worth having it in something with side settings? I just worry about, like a good example is what you saw on the screen there. If two developers want word wrap to be separate, you don't want to check in the settings.
Right.
You just want to be able to check in workspace definitions, right? It might be nice to have them in a separate file than the settings file, but I understand.
So
it's probably a pain to have yet another file.
Yeah, so I sort of skipped past this earlier. So in this case here, we've explicitly decided to set some settings that we want applied across all folders. So with this being in this folder here, these will apply across the whole project. The question about which if one developer wants word wrap off, one developer wants it on, then that would be for you to decide. You're not, obviously we're not saying you're forced to do this, but this is where you would put those settings that you want everybody to adhere to.
It's just the defaults, yeah, and then the user settings would override it.
Yeah. These were just imagine that we as a team decided we want word wrap off,
right,
and that's what we decided we would do, so we put it in here. And the key
thing
what
is, what do you do when the user workspaces conflict with the root workspaces?
So it would follow our regular hierarchy. The workspace folder overrides the user settings. So, and in most cases, these settings, there's some settings where there's a whole other discussion and a whole other sort of conversation we need to have about how we deal with some settings. For example, if you turn autosave on and off, that might there might be some conflicts if I try to turn, say, for this folder here, I want autosave on. For this folder, I want autosave off. That could lead to some conflict and some odd behavior. So there's certain of those details that we need to fix. But for the most part, most settings can be applied across the whole workspace. But in general, this whole transferring from your user settings to our workspace settings in order to share with the rest of your colleagues to check it into source control, that's the approach. I see Alexei has mentioned, added something. Workspace settings, I would not expect path in workspaces as an ID. I'm using VS Code in multiple platforms, and these paths are dynamic. I suggest to introduce project name or something. So does that mean, Alexei, so if you're, so in this case, the path though is still just, for the workspace setting, the path is still the current folder. That we're just using the dot here, so you're not actually hard coding. When it's in this workspace settings, you're not hard coding the value of the path. So this would work across, wherever you have opened that workspace from. Everything else, if I go back, the other additional folders are relative to that path. So whatever platform you're on, wherever you open this project up, the Express is, in this case, is a subfolder of the root, and the Express plugin is a root. So your comment was about the first slide with using file, right? So having the full hard-coded path under the user settings rather than the workspace settings. Okay, well that's good feedback. We'll need to take that. We'll think about that. So I have 2 minutes left of this session. This is everything that we have to show you in terms of our multi-folder experience. What are any comments overall? Does this meet your expectations, or are there certain things that you expected that we haven't shown yet?
If you released this today, I would be excited about it.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Are we missing anything? Is there anything that you expected to see that I haven't shown you?
Nope.
No, I mean, we talked a lot about like little things, but I think it sounded to me like everyone was pretty pleased overall.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that it's being kept simple, right?
Yeah.
Don't over-engineer it.
That's right. We spent a lot of time making sure that we could do that.
It's great.
Yeah, so for me personally, the most important thing would be the multi-folder search. That's something I use every single day. So if we could get that would be awesome.
Yeah.
That's my side.
Yep, definitely. All right, folks. Well, I think we will finish up there. Sorry for the technical hassles to begin with on my part, but thanks for sticking with it, and thanks for your feedback. And we look forward to continuing to hear your feedback as we work on this.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for meeting with us.
No problem. Thank you for joining. All the best. Bye.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.